I think that the Enneagram, held from a later stage perspective, is a tool to help people develop through these stages.
Yeah.
And that's like the point of it. The stage that basically corresponds to yellow. One of the blind spots or the shadows of that stage is basically an insistence upon development itself. Like, I think that the levels of development framework is, for the world, a bigger deal than the Enneagram. And this is
canceled.
Blasphemy. How could you say that on an
Shut off his
Enneagram
mic right now.
The big hormone Enneagram.
Hi, I'm John Lukovich, sexual self-pres 4-5 link, 4-5-8 trifix.
Hi, I'm David Gray, self-pres sexual 9-1, 9-7-4 trifix.
What up, it's Emeka. I'm an 8-7, sexual self-pres with 8-5-4 fixes.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I am a self-pres social 3, wing 4, with a 3-6-9 trifix. If you like our podcast, guys, make sure you go like and subscribe on the Apple Podcast app. And if you really like us, you should definitely leave us a review.
Okay, so, again, like I'm thinking about different critiques of the approach to Enneagram material and sharing and teaching and stuff like this. And in my view, part of what this conversation brings up for Enneagram people is like, what does it mean to help somebody with the Enneagram? And the majority of people's view on what helping somebody with the Enneagram means is that kind of loving, holding, validating approach.
Yes.
And that they think that is what compassion is, period.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of you can talk about it as like feminine compassion or masculine compassion or something like this.
Yes.
But like sometimes in a process when you're coaching somebody or whatever, that holding is the thing. It's so fucking important and it's really necessary, and it's like you need that to go to a place where then somebody can trust you to push on their world a little bit. And so like having more of like actually you're not seeing yourself, here's an invitation to, or here's a tool for you to see yourself better, or to say actually the way you're understanding or holding this concept is still not quite right, and people will think like that's being really mean or invalidating or or what,
because I see myself this way, and that's my subjective experience of myself. And so, how can you tell me that I'm wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
I got into a thing with a well-known Enneagram influencer on Instagram and podcaster, and I was like, well, I said something like, she made this post, and she was like, it was about 4, but it was describing 9, and I said, well, I think you're describing 9 here, and this is how it is 9-ish. And this is a big comment and problem in the Enneagram field. And then she DM'd me and she was like, what are you talking about? And then I was like, kind of went through like attachment, blah, blah, blah. And then she was like, now you're mansplaining to me? And and then went on this thing about, and I was like, no, you asked me to define my terms. I'm just making sure we're on the same page. And then went on to do her, to talk about her credentials, right? Like, oh, I've been certified by this. And there's no engagement with the content. And so for me, there was like this, on one hand, there was first a green perspective of validation, invalidation going on.
Yeah.
And then when that like didn't quite work on me or whatever, then she went to orange, where I'm qualified. So I'm not questionable. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've got these certifications that mean this outcome is there. And it was like an interesting that's exemplary of a lot of people's way that they hold the Enneagram. And so when you don't hold it according to their worldview, they can interpret it as being mean or bad or wrong. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yes. Yeah. And all the stages, green and below, are fundamentalist about their view, including green. Green. That's where you get like the quote unquote mean green thing, where it's like, everyone's perspective is valid, except the only thing we don't tolerate is intolerance, and we also don't tolerate people who are against peace and things like that, and not realizing that there's not realizing that there's what they call a performative contradiction in that I'm espousing certain values but embodying others. And
wow,
yeah.
So what is the next
Yeah, so
Tell us
in the
about
David's
the
ready
next
to move
stage.
on.
in terms of the colors,
Fuck green.
Impatient 9.
Impatient
in terms of
9.
colors, the next colors are yellow and turquoise, or sometimes it's called teal. And the important thing is that from green to the next one in the spiral dynamics framework, there's a major shift from what they call first tier to second tier. And so for all the stages up to green are first tier, and then yellow is the second tier stage. And what characterizes second tier as a major distinction from first tier is that second tier is aware of the levels, and can meet each level at its level. Can speak the language of each level. And there's this really funny term in the spiral dynamics book called being a spiral wizard, which is basically
A wizard.
You're a wizard,
But-
Harry.
A wizard.
Everybody's going to look at the spiral
the-
dynamics and say, that's
Spooky
me.
Halloween.
I'm the wizard.
Yeah, that's the
for
thing about
real.
spiral dynamics.
I know it's
No,
really
I'm
fun.
sure of it.
Yeah.
That's the thing about spiral dynamics is like, especially people that are really into it, almost always think that they're like 2 or 3 levels higher than they are.
Yeah.
Of course they do.
It's so funny where they're like, yeah, well, I'm probably a turquoise teal, and
Yeah.
there's
Oh,
like,
wow.
I'm the
it's
wizard
either-
type.
it's either outwardly said or like implied heavily of like how
Yeah,
high my level is. And just
Well, if
'cause
you've read the book, then you think you get it, and that's you can
Oh, fair.
Right.
you can understand, like Orange has the cognitive capacity to understand the framework from
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know what I mean, but not the interiority to really really understand it.
And there's some orange people teaching from a higher level that the spiral dynamics is like a replacement for the levels of development when it's actually just a totally
Illustrating
different
it.
It's a
model
different thing,
altogether.
totally different thing. Yeah.
Is the spiral dynamics book that she keeps talking about by Don Beck?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what's it called?
And like Chris Cowan or something. I think it's just called Spiral Dynamics.
It's
I've got it here.
called Spiral Dynamics Integral. Don
Yeah.
Beck.
Oh no, that's the audiobook version, I think, which is
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah,
Okay.
it's excellent.
That's
Yeah.
pretty much the only way I read.
Nice.
I'm too
Someone
busy
else
to.
does it.
That's actually it's not the same book. It's like it's Don Beck just giving a series of lectures on Spiral,
Fuck.
but it's really
Alright.
good. It's good. It's good.
Okay.
Never stopping, Nancy.
Never stopping.
Married to the
Amazing.
grind.
So at yellow, what you get is now you've differentiated sort of objectivity exterior and subjectivity interior, and and having now differentiated them, you can integrate them, and you can merge in a calibrated, custom way, feminine and masculine compassion to meet a person appropriately in the moment. So green heavily errs towards feminine, holding, nurturing, validating, empathy. At yellow, you can understand that, yeah, that's really important. That's a beautiful thing. And also sometimes it's important to penetrate through someone's consciousness to be like, hey,
It
bro,
is.
you're not seeing it. No, like you can do better.
Penetrate.
Yeah.
Penetrate me, bro.
Thrust.
This is the level that we're at.
Phallus.
The penetrate level. Holds and penetrate.
Did you guys
couple
see
of things. Go ahead.
Well, no, this is like a dumb aside, but did you guys see that post where people were like, someone did all the like catchphrases of all you
Yeah,
guys, and for
that's what I was
Emeka, one
just
of them was like,
referring
penetrate.
Yeah.
Oh my God, no,
One
I
of-
didn't see this. Because isms is to say penetrate every 5 seconds. Yeah, and leverage. Is it on
Carry
the
on.
Enneagram page?
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Anyway,
I
as
want-
you,
I
as you
want-
were.
What I want is a bobblehead
Um,
of Emeka that has like a button where he can like throw a punch.
That'd be great.
Like one of those like boxing nun puppets.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Great.
So all right. So what's going on with the yellow? Like describe the yellow one.
Mhm.
So the yellow one is it kind of understands and can integrate the important insights of all the levels beneath. And one important thing to say about development itself is that when you transcend to another level, you also retain the capacities of the previous ones. And so there's this idea of transcend and include. And that's why, and they're sort of like
Nice.
Russian doll nested within each other. And so at yellow, you have the goal setting capacity of orange. You've got the potential to be authoritarian like red or blue. You've got in the appropriate circumstance, you have the empathic capacity of green, and you're able to integrate them all into a coherent, paradoxical, and somewhat, to a person at an earlier stage, what would seem contradictory framework, but actually there's a sense to it. It coheres. And there's a more willingness. This is why, like, greater flexibility of response to life at yellow.
So what would it mean to hold the Enneagram on this level?
At this level, so that whole thing of, like, at green, we're creating safe spaces, we're honoring each other's inner experience, like, oh, you're this person and I'm this person, and how cool, like, there's at yellow a more willingness to be razor sharp with your distinctions, and a more willingness to, on the one hand, be empathic, but on the other hand, to well, like this podcast does, like, push. So I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself. Let me see what else is here. It's like,
can I ask, how does yellow, how do I say this? What did yellow take from orange? Yellow's above orange, right? Yeah, what did yellow take from orange? Because I heard it and don't quite know how to differentiate it from orange.
Yeah.
You're talking about green, or the one right before it, or the one?
No, I know how orange absorbs in green, but how does yellow adopt orange and then add to it?
Yellow. So at orange,
the naming partly, the categorizing,
okay.
Right? There's definitions.
Yes. Yeah. Orange is objective noticing and optimizing and metrics and goal setting, and I like the word categorizing. Green is sort of beyond that, to the degree that we're now recognizing that there are ways of determining subjective truth that are valid, or that subjective truth has validity, not just objectivity. And yellow holds them both. You can do both. At orange, you don't have the green capacity of empathy, and so yellow adds to orange by basically saying, well, we can do both. Okay. And more broadly, it's not just integrating what came before. There's also emergent qualities in yellow, like the ability to hold and integrate just greater and greater complexity, like systems thinking, is a yellow idea. The awareness that A causes B and B causes A.
Yeah.
Always.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's clicking, yeah.
In a circular loop-like fashion. That the interconnectivity of everything. That's a yellow idea. Not in a kind of green, we're all connected kind of way, but like in a more
there's a structure
way.
Of connection.
There's a structure, structure connection. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So is one way to expand on what yellow is also is to go on to the next one and talk about like what yellow lacks.
And this is where
wait, I want to stay in yellow first.
Yeah, can we hang out at yellow, David?
I know you're a fast-paced guy, David.
Yeah. David's transcending.
The slowest person on the podcast is like, this isn't fast enough.
Come on, guys. God.
David's hoping that we'll all join him at turquoise.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm already past this. I am the higher
level.
rainbow.
The wizard. David's the wizard.
David's 7 fix is more obnoxious than my 7 wing, for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
That's so true.
Can you please move on?
That's so true.
Just getting to know yellow, for fuck's sake, man.
It's magical.
He's like, your Uber is outside. I'm ready for the next girl.
It's 9 a.m., bitch. Get the fuck out.
Get the fuck out.
Making pancakes.
I'm just trying to help.
We love
trying to heal you guys.
trying to heal you guys.
No, I wanted to say something about yellow, just that it seems like what's really annoying about a lot of self-help is that it does overdo this green fucking the secret. If you just think about it, it'll work out, and if you believe it. And of course, like most pragmatic business people are like, you just got to fucking grind and just here are these list of things that you need to do to make money or get this outcome or get the girl or whatever it is. And then both sides can lead to a lot of disillusionment because there is an internal and there is an external aspect of any process. You can't just like hammer away at the world for certain results, which I've done, and like keep hooking up with girls and not think about what that's doing to your heart. And at the same time, you can't just be like going around like, I'm just looking for love without thinking about the external realities of a relationship and things like that. So things get really complex, and I think most people aren't really patient for that level of complexity because the easy answers are really digestible and easy to spread. But
I think that was a great example, Emeka, of dating.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before, and that just makes perfect sense.
That's excellent. Yeah, I agree.
Going some green eye gazing,
right?
Because
at green, you could be just like, I feel this way, and so that means that a relationship,
everything's going to magically work out.
And this doesn't work that way. And at the lower level, it's just like, oh, we just line up. Like this relationships make sense, but there's no interior. Like, where's the feeling? Or just like, guys getting advice, like just go talk to girls to say this and you'll get the girl. You can get the outcome, but there's no real chemistry and dynamic.
Magic.
And so you need both.
Look at this relationship spiral wizard.
Emeka the two.
Alakazam.
See, David, if we would have moved on, you wouldn't have got this magic that I just...
Yeah, wizard, listen up.
My magic.
We need all that foreplay to get here.
You got to have Emeka play with his wand.
One other thing as a distinction between green and yellow, I'll make is that with each stage, there's not just the ability to integrate the previous stages, but more texture and nuance and complexity from like as a almost linear advancement from the previous stage. So like the green way of understanding interiority has a kind of washiness to it that gets clarified and into a high resolution at yellow. And that's partly because you're at yellow, you're willing to make you're sort of starting to be willing to make more distinctions that recognize, for example, that maybe a person isn't whole. At green it's like this person is whole, period. At yellow it's like, well, actually, what about like people who aren't whole? Like, what about psychopaths? Or what about people who? And so that's part of the being willing to incorporate more sources of truth. Like at green, there's a kind of blind spot just because it's so insistence on love.
Yeah, totally. So what's a limitation of yellow?
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. I've just been looking out for David. Because one of the things that's difficult is that because like developmentally yellow is fairly, would you say, new, or not a lot of people are at yellow, right, relative to the whole population, and so there's not a lot of being able to like kind of point out yellowness and then sort of like a large scale way of saying, oh, this cultural milieu is yellow and this is the limitation of it. And then so therefore also turquoise isn't really well defined. And when people talk about turquoise, they're always like, yeah, what's it's like a more like a, you sort of see like what, they kind of talk. It's like a kind of, it's gonna be really good, trust me, kind of way of speaking. It's at least whatever I've come upon. So, what are the limitations of yellow?
I think we're running into the limits of my expertise here, but I'll share a couple insights So first of all, I don't hear a lot of people making like very clear distinctions between yellow and there are chapters on it in the Spiral Dynamics book, but as I recall, they're shorter than for the other stages, and in a sense, because it's the frontier, it's not as well understood. There aren't as many people. It's not as easy to research, you might say. And even one of the first ways that I got acquainted with this theory at all was when I read this book called Reinventing Organizations, which is fantastic, and it basically talks about blue, orange, green, and then jumps to teal forms of organizations and what values are at the center of those organizations, what organizational structures support that stage of being in those organizations. And anyway, so it doesn't talk about yellow at all; it just goes to teal. And what I remember from the Spiral Dynamics book is that yellow So, David, to your point that these stages oscillate back and forth, one ways they oscillate is from a kind of individual to collectivist mentality. So,
right.
blue is collectivist, like, our tribe, what the priest says. Orange is individualist, my achievement, the objective metrics by which I set my goals. Green is collectivist, we're all in it together, pacifist, love is everything, love will solve everything. Yellow is now my capacity to integrate all sources of knowledge and truth and to be sort of the spiral wizard myself. Turquoise or teal is kind of like the collective realization of that individual vision. So like spirit itself, or interconnected societies and global, I don't know, like
really good stuff.
Yeah, good shit.
But
yeah.
No, the way I think of it is like
trust me, yeah.
From my limited understanding, it's like, you got yellow and you got this sense of like there is development and your subjectivity is important, but then the objectivity is important as well. There's this synthesis and there's this way of saying, all right, like how do you support somebody's subjective experience to evolve along a objective developmental model, right? But it's, to me, it's kind of like there's a faith in, how do I put it, like people being able to arrive somewhere. And I feel like what I understand of teal, turquoise, whatever, is because it's that collectivist like iteration of the development, there's a little bit of like it can be kind of considered like semi-authoritarian in a certain way, because what you're doing is you're saying there are these objective ways to nurture a subjectivity. There's an environment you need to set up in a certain way, right? Like for example, like take the ideal of like something like communism, right? Where you're saying that not everybody's created equal, and not everybody can develop, but you want to make sure that there are there are ways that people can get what they need at their own stages, but you need to craft the environment in that way and not just wait for people to like get there themselves. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, yes. I think that because like what are the limitations of yellow? Limitations of yellow is that like goal of yellow is that there's some kind of personal developmental journey that requires both developing one's interiority and developing one's interiority in kind of relationship to some sort of objective sense of development, of growth, of structure. Am I saying that correctly?
Sure. Keep going. I'm with you.
But then okay, you just gotta keep getting more refined in this developmental thing. But then everyone's not going to get there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the blind spots, and again, okay, so spiral dynamics is one theory of development, and interestingly, it's actually not the one that I'm most learned in. Another one, I just took this like 9-month program on it. It was like the ego development theory of a woman named Susan Cook-Reuter, and there are ways that her theory lines up with spiral dynamics, and other ways that it makes finer distinctions, and there are more stages and stuff like that. And one of the things that in the Susan Cook-Reuter's framework, that the stage that basically corresponds to yellow, one of the blind spots or the shadows of that stage is basically an insistence upon development itself. That there's a kind of agenda about development.
Right.
And I think that's what you're pointing to, right, John?
Yes.
It's like, yeah. And so, and I certainly, when I entered that program, was kind of a poster child of this shadow. It's like a kind of hubris about how developed I am, and basically a sense of like, well, everyone needs to get on my level. It is a kind of fundamentalism. It's an awareness of the developmental stages, but it's also a sense of superiority. And based on, you might say, the construct of development itself. And so the next stage is basically construct aware, where it's like all we're doing is making stories, and meaning making itself is just a process that is profoundly subjective. And even any developmental framework that I hold is some way that I'm trying to orient myself to meaning. And actually, we are what? Spirit, dust. Meaning is subjective and perspectival, and
everything's an illusion.
Yeah. And this is not I want to make a distinction, not the 9 fixation of like, well, everything's the same, so whatever.
Right.
It's like it's a fundamental realization that all we have is interpretation all the way down.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times the turquoise teal level is almost just it's spirit, and it's like then it gets caught in what the distinction we made at the beginning, which is the Enneagrammatic Don Riso levels of development. That's awakening, and spiral dynamics is not. It can overlap with awakening, but it's not awakening.
Yes, and
it's a different thing.
Yes, it is a different thing. Yeah. So I'm a little fuzzier on the teal thing. I like the question you're asking because I think it points to a direction that would be really useful to clarify. Part of the evolution beyond yellow, or in Cezanne Kierkegaard's framework, it would be stage 5, integrating, is this construct-aware thing, which includes, by the way, understanding that the Enneagram itself is a construct, and that the way that we understand what type is an elaborate mental model that allows us to orient to a reality that, in order to understand it, we require an orientation, but an orientation is just a choice of a vantage point. Period.
Yeah.
And there are infinite vantage points. And to like really stand in that truth is very disorienting. But that's basically what the next stage is.
But I think you'd still be able to draw on the context specific.
Yes, you would.
Construct to wield that tool as necessary and let it go.
Precisely. Yeah. It's a kind of like, it's almost like a whimsicalness, like a lightly holding, like
a wizard.
To have like, you can be construct aware and an expert in the Enneagram, and use the Enneagram, and also be self-aware that you're using a thing that is just itself one vantage point on the inner world. Yeah, I'm fascinated. I mean, just to, like, if you look at OPS or if you look at Jungian archetypes or whatever, like, there's just so many ways. Like, you can draw your base vectors however you want, and then go as deep as you want into the inner world, and make as many distinctions as you want. And any path and framework that you take to expose the inner world is going to reveal something fascinating and useful. The Enneagram is just one way,
right?
And that dissolves the developmental agenda of yellow, because there's just a more lightly holding, like, people are making meaning however they're making meaning, period. That's just the vantage point they're coming from.
So I feel like I just got Mr. Miyagi over here, and I don't appreciate it, because at the beginning you were saying how the structure of growth is necessary, or something along those lines.
Yes, I did say that.
It got lost in my Bermuda head, so who knows. And then once we get to turquoise teal, the structure is no longer necessary and is let go.
Josh, why are you a liar?
But
appreciate being lied to. And I hate it.
Josh, that's just too much complexity, man.
Getting at the fundamental deception.
Are you trying to
idea of there being structure?
You trying to flex on us and tell us you're at turquoise? What are you doing?
Josh is a wizard.
I think what I'm trying to do is make the distinction that, Nancy, I really like your point, that there's a kind of fundamental contradiction in what I said. And I think just the way I'd resolve it is by saying that, on the one hand, it's true that constructs are all we have, and that none of them is necessarily more true than another. On the other hand, I'm also saying that development is really important, and that if we're going to be using the construct of the Enneagram, a way to flesh it out would be to include a growing up framework. And I'm also saying that from a certain vantage point, like, at yellow or beyond, there's the awareness of people are advancing their ways of meaning making, and if a person has chosen to go on in the Enneagram and that's their way of making meaning, then that's a lever, and if you're a coach or a therapist or a teacher, then you can use that lever to help expand their awareness, their self-awareness from their points of view. Even so, I guess what I'm saying is, even if you're holding the Enneagram itself lightly, or you're aware that it's just a construct, you can still use it.
Mm-hmm. so part of so I think the way to develop is having to run into or exhaust the capacities of your level.
Yes.
Right. So like earlier, I was speculating that like the limitation of orange, for example, would be like, hey, we have this structure to get this kind of outcome. Like if you're in a business or something, you're like, oh, we want to make this kind of money or something like that. And you're just applying it to workers, but then it's actually not working because something about each worker's subjective experience becomes important.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go, oh, who are these workers and what are their identities and stuff like this? And that's where you get, like, I don't know. It's just a shift in a value system because it's like, oh, and then the outcome becomes less important because it's like, oh, work in subjectivity is now important. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I recognize that I'm not getting my orange outcome because I'm not including some new information, and then I reach the kind of like the limit of it, and then it's like, oh, now what information am I missing? And then the investigation to that new information or that gap leads to a new whole value system because you're including a new awareness. And so I feel like the thing to do, whatever level you perceive yourself to be, and keeping in mind that we always perceive ourselves to be higher than we are, is to really just like consciously see if you can experience the limits.
Yeah.
Push yourself to the limit of your framework, even if you don't quite know what your framework is. Like keep pushing. Like we're all a little bit authoritarian about our level, right?
Right.
And so how do you really push into like almost like enhance that authoritarianism in yourself, and where you're like investigating, like what am I taking to be like really something, and like just get to the edge of it.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
That's beautifully said. Yeah.
And like the green Enneagram people could maybe get to the point of seeing that there's all these definitions and all of these arguments and so forth about what the types are and so forth, and that it's not getting anywhere by valuing all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm also thinking like is there an example we can give of what it means to hold the Enneagram at yellow, and then maybe the limits of that? Like I think for example, I think dark arts is probably applying, it's like from yellow applying a kind of an orange methodology. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
because you're looking at it in a structural way. I don't know if it's yellow or if it's just straight up orange, but it's like there's that kind of thread is there, right? And but I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to.
Well, because the thing with dark arts is that to say that there is an objective Enneagram, there is like such a thing as a type, but that you have to form your own relationship to where that type, based on your own subjective experience of that type. And in some way you have to go back and forth between, yes, there is a structure to the Enneagram, but how you experience that type, that structure is going to be subjective. And that is a learning methodology. Because I have my own experience of 8, and it's still within the 8 type structure, but there is a very subjective experience that I have that allows me to recognize what an 8 is. And that's like the thing that's really cool about the Enneagram is that there is that subjective. I can tell you what an 8 is, but you're going to have a subjective experience of 8ness that only you, that's specific to you. And you have to find it. And that's part of, I think what we're trying to get people to do is like, we can't just give you a checklist. You actually have to experience the Enneagram for yourself.
Yes. I think we're, not just a checklist. I think like a lot of what we're offering, like, we were talking about this yesterday, Josh, or 2 days ago, whatever, is, there's this thing in the Enneagram, and there's like, here's the traits, here's the descriptions, here's the basic fears, basic desires, which themselves are our understanding of what those things mean changed vastly at our whatever color level, our spiral level. And so that's why I fucking hate the basic fears, basic desires.
Yeah.
As they're mostly interested in taught. Anyway, that's a whole thing. But
the other thing also, just showing people how much variation there is within a type forces you to let go of these definitions and see like even with a type twin, because this is just a framework that's describing a certain structure, that there are so many other things that the Enneagram can't describe. And so people sometimes come to the Enneagram hoping that it has all these answers for every aspect of what it means to be human. And I know I went through this, just like, oh, this symbol has, all these types that can explain so much. You're like, oh, you realize, oh, this is actually just what it's explaining. Like this type structure is a container that can describe certain things, like a certain pathway of personality. But then there's, even within the same type, there's so many other things like culture and, like somebody's different OPS type. Like there are so many other things. And so you learn to like hold on to the hard structure of the Enneagram, but at the same time, hold on to it very loosely. And the subjectivity, that's the advanced, Enneagrammer approach, is that you realize how subjective this thing can be, while still holding on to the fact that, there is some hard structure to it.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's funny. I've been approached so many times with people being like, "Here's a Ken Wilber thing, or integral theory thing, or spiral dynamics thing in the Enneagram," and just like trying to lump it together, but not really even having this sort of integrated view of what they actually mean collaboratively. Like what does it actually mean to interface the Enneagram with these ideas, models, and theories? Which, it's people. It's kind of like people will be like, here's my book, The Enneagram and the Chakras. And it's like, type 4s have big heart chakras, and that's it. And it's like, it's just like trying to mash things together.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just think that I think what's important just to hold about this is both our own biases and limitations in how we understand ourselves in the world. I mean, that's what the Enneagram itself is about. And the spiral gives another texture to that. And, it's like, don't get overly wedded to got to grow and get to the next level. And I got to be like a Teal superstar, because that's going to be coming from a lower developmental level value itself. And the thing to do is to just like be really in and exhaust your level. I think it's just like really just see the limitations. It's like same thing with being present. It's like it doesn't do us any good to be like, I'm really present now, I can sense my hand for 15 seconds. It's like we have to see how much we fail, and that failure is like what starts to move us into, I don't want to just be failing to be present anymore, and it inspires a wish to be present. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Yeah, I've really gotten a lot from the calls we did with Julie, in terms of integrating like a feminine approach to things, and how much our society is so tilted towards the masculine perspective. And it's also, there's a lot of overlap between the masculine perspective and sort of like this outcome-oriented orange corporate perspective. And I think I've just been thinking about how there's so much of a allergy to allowing things to unfold, or even just like the cyclical nature of you exert yourself and you reach a certain point and you just don't do anything. Like there's kind of like this go directive way of doing things. And, the Enneagram has really forced me to, as an assertive type, because this idea that I can basically create my own reality. And then you hit a wall because you realize that formula doesn't always work. And there's kind of like a interior aspect that's required. But I could imagine certain assertive types who were successful in their attempts to create their own reality would go their whole lives without having to be confronted with having to go inner, which can be its own curse. But the Enneagram forces you, even just learning the Enneagram itself is like, I couldn't just do the assertive type thing. That there is such a, well, at least it required a subjectivity that goes against my sort of type structure to just, I'm going to make it happen. Like you have to allow certain things to, and that kind of overlaps with the feminine approach.
Totally. I mean, I think you make a really good point about how we avoid we craft our world to avoid running into the limitations of our world.
Yeah.
And so like that sort of type example is really great, right? Or like a drawn type might stay in like a green world because it's like, well, my inner world is really important to me, and therefore inner worlds are important, and it's like I don't want anything in my own inner world to be invalidated.
Yeah.
I don't want I think assertive types can get caught in the orange thing pretty easily because it's just like
outcomes.
Yeah. Keep going. But as you're saying, it's like there's a way I avoid seeing the limitations of that outcome specific thing, and then like, how do I use my outcome orientation to see like that there's another kind of outcome?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Like it's at least for me, like I've had to really pay attention to this. It's something that I have had to schedule weekly sort of like dates to sort of force myself to check back into like my long-term values. This is like a new thing because I've recognized that I can just keep doing asserting and sometimes lose track of like what's at the heart of what I'm doing. Like even just the question, is your heart even in this? Is something that I've been forcing myself. So just to make sure that I'm getting some interiority, like that's a conscious thing that I've had to do. And so it's easy to make decisions from a sense of how things might play out externally, and that's just my bias. And so it's I've had to work on checking in with where I am internally to have to do inner and outer at the same time. But at the same time, I get really triggered by people that stay just in my valid feelings about things because I'm seeing what's happening externally.
Right. Totally.
And I'm like, you're a fucking moron if you're not factoring how this is going to play out in the outer world. But at the same time, like me as an assertive type, you can just keep running and not even know where you're going is actually, if your heart's not even in it. And that's something I just keep coming back to. Where's your heart? Is your heart even in this?
Yeah, totally. Well, is there anything else about this topic that we needs to be mentioned or covered?
I'll just say one other thing is that as I started getting into this world of learning human development and developmental psychology, it was starting to clarify or make new distinctions about types for me from the point of like not mashing the two frameworks together, but like how one serves as a kind of scalpel to refine the other in a sense. Like when I was reading the book on spiral dynamics, I was reading the chapter on orange, and it was like, wow, this is a lot of language that would normally be used to describe threes, like goal-oriented, achievement, success-oriented. And you can be a 4-year-old 3 and not at orange and also not care about goals, but you're still 3. And you can be an 87-year-old 3 that is like beyond needing to be successful in some way, but you're still 3.
Right.
And so it's like, what is essentially 3 from this point of view?
Separate from those. Yeah.
Separate from what achievement is, and it's not about achievement necessarily. It's about, being a heart type and being an image type and like wanting for a certain kind of gaze to fall upon me.
Yeah.
That's a different thing from like being goal oriented. And obviously they can get conflated, but, or one can lead to the other, but they're different. And, there's like certain levels of developments that are, one in another framework, one's called group centric. And there's a lot of language in it that is it's very much like 6 or 9. And then there's like the traditionalist, which has a lot of language that sometimes corresponds to language that is used to describe ones, like a certain kind of fixated fundamentalist point of view. And anyway, so it's like that those stages are not types. It's conceivable that every type can go through each of these stages. And so what does it mean to be a 3 ascending through these stages? And like I did a whole exercise where I did like took like a biographical inventory of like what stage I was coming from and what my orientation was to feeling valuable, like the whole 3 seeking essential value through the lens of each of the stages. And there was a pretty clear differentiation from stage to stage.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really great point is people will say like, a 3, and then they'll just think about the orange level.
That's right.
What's the green? And what's the 3 operating at green look like?
Yes.
Right. Like
and a 3, like this is a huge thing. It's like a 3 at orange is your stereotypical green. That's what all the books are written about.
Yep.
A 3 at green is like their entire value system shifts to an internal metric of integrity and love. And there's a way that they can be seeing themselves and performing to a self-image of love.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was doing as a 3
Mhm.
at Green. It's like I'm trying to be the most loving person possible. I'm writing.
I feel your pain.
I'm doing like a 100-day practice of writing a gratitude letter to a person every day. That's like
What?
that's like that's
You did
that's
that?
a 3. That's a 3 at Green. You know what I'm saying? And
Wow.
so it's not. I'm not trying to win the A+ from someone else anymore. But there's a Green way of like seeing myself that I'm trying to perform to.
And Micah, what's it like to be a 8 at Green?
I just skipped green and went to yellow. That's it. I mean, like Alma, the hugging saint, would be like a saint.
There's that one woman who's a minister. Can't remember her name. She's pretty well known on some of these Facebook forums. Holtz is her last name or something.
That
like that.
Nadia Weber,
That's it. Yeah.
the 8.
I
yeah.
think she's a 8 at Green.
What's her message?
I don't know.
Why is she at 8 at green? Can somebody explain?
It's just, it's like,
cannot
I don't know.
explain.
It's just, it's collectivist. Come into this church where you can believe everything. She's still, it's sort of doing around the side. She's still the authority, and people are looking up to her as an 8, just kind of reflexively.
Is that the one with all the tattoos? Like she,
Yes.
the priest?
Yes,
Oh,
that's
okay, yeah. I remember her now.
I think
she
that's
was
8 at Green.
Yeah, she had
I'm pretty sure my mom sent me her Instagram and was like, "Look at this woman. I
Yeah.
love her."
like accepting everyone is welcome kind
Yeah.
of thing. We're not going to judge you. Your experience of whatever is valid.
That's it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
immediately cringed at her.
David, what is it like to be the wizard at the top of the spiral?
Well, for one thing, it means like impatience with the pace of things because I'm already arrived.
Done with the
Yeah.
constructs. It's like, why are we still talking about these categories? Can we just go to the
Cores
part
are
where
useless.
we melt into each other as spirits?
Makes me
One
value
bed.
that I, rushed things along a little bit so that this could be consolidated and people would actually listen to it and it wouldn't be too long of a podcast.
Well, it's going to be 2 podcasts. I'm not making anybody suffer through 2 hours of us talking about spiral dynamics.
Except for all of us on this call.
I mean, it was interesting.
We don't
but-
count.
Anybody
I
have
have a
more
quick.
There's a rush.
No,
What
I
is
wanna go.
the?
Just when
I also wanna
Alexander
go, but
starts
go ahead,
talking,
Alexander.
No, no.
he's like, I want to leave now.
Right now.
Well, this is
but
all
I'll
new input for
practice,
me.
Teal. Let's see. Yeah.
What is the name of the book? Not the audio book, but because I'm looking on Amazon and there's one of like mastery and something. And what is the name of the paperback book?
Also, is there a Ken Wilber book specifically on this, or are they all sort of integrating it?
Ken Wilber is the person one of the people who's made spiral dynamics popular, but he hasn't written a book about spiral dynamics.
Okay.
His books are integrating in frameworks like spiral dynamics together.
Okay.
The book
I'm
is called Spiral Dynamics: Mastering Values, Leadership, and Change.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, done. Thanks.
Yeah, this is really cool.
This is great.
Yeah, this
Thank you,
is
Josh.
very interesting.
This would be
I-
a good thing to revisit. Also,
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
like as we all absorb it a little more, to
Yeah.
come back to it and be able to have
Totally.
more language on it.
Especially if we get to have Josh's pretty face back on this pod.
Yeah.
Model Josh.
Sparkly 3.
I'll say one final thing about this. This is like, I think that the levels of development framework is for the world a bigger deal than the Enneagram, and this is
Canceled.
the-
Blasphemy. How could you say that on an
Shut off his
Enneagram
mic right now.
podcast?
I think that the Enneagram, held from a later stage perspective, is a tool to help people develop through these stages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Right.
that's like the point of it. And I think of a lot of the problems that are in our world they exist because we have not collectively risen to a stage of development at which they're solvable. And you know, like if you look at what racism is, you know, fundamentally from us, it's like it's a stage thing. It's like you know what I mean? It's a tribal stage thing. Like the solution to racism isn't like for a person who's in a certain stage who's a racist, to be bopped on the head and said you need to be more empathic. As we were saying before, with respect to the word empathy, there's no place for them to put it. The solution is to help people collectively grow through stages. Yeah. And to the extent that the Enneagram can be marshaled to that purpose, I think it's a really that's why I care about the Enneagram, or it's why I care about it now anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although part of me just doesn't believe that people are going to do that. Right. I think that's the purpose, but you know, it's hard to
not
really
before the world burns anyway.
Yeah, it's hard to have any faith in humanity as a whole.
Well, when you reach Teal, you realize certain things.
You realize all of this is pointless, and he's over it.
The level above Teal is gray.
Is it really?
I'll teach you guys about
Gray Wizard.
On the next episode, I'll explain it all.
But I mean, I'd like to think that our approach to the Enneagram is kind of funneling people through certain shock points. Like, you know, people are really upset about not a 4, but it is kind of like, yeah, it's going to force you to fucking go back and look at the Enneagram a lot deeper. And so I'm really proud to see the level of nuance and complexity that people that come to our group are able to hold.
Yeah.
It just says so much about, like, yeah, people are upset maybe about our approach, but look at the end result. Like, look at the way people can approach the Enneagram and themselves in a very complex inner and outer kind of way. So, yeah.
All right. I got to get going.
Yeah, I've yawned one too many times.
Yeah.
All right.
My social battery. Thanks, Josh, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
This was great.
We'll have you on again. And, you know, Josh has been working on some very cool ways of looking at the centers that's, like, very developmental also. And it's been just clicking a lot, and I think it has a lot of really cool implications for Trifix. So,
oh, nice.
Down the line,
Nice.
when Josh is ready to reveal his baby, we will
Looking forward to
that
it.
back up.
Cool.
We know if
Thanks,
you
guys.
need another 3 on the pod.
Yeah, I'm coming for you soon.
Perfect. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
Later.
Bye.
All right, guys. Bye.
This goes out to all you suckers, player hated motherfuckers. Jealousy is in you busters, ho. You know I'm really bumping. 666 blasting bitches, robbing riches.